Mongiatti from the Scientific Team at the British Museum, and she's going to talk about goldworking techniques in Siberia.
Thank you, Rebecca. Can you hear me? Yeah. So as good afternoon, everyone. As Rebecca was mentioning, the work that I will talk about was undertaken during the installation schedule, so a 3-week window of opportunity to look at objects together with Elena Korolkova, who's the curator who presented the collection of which I will talk about. But just a little bit to introduce myself, I'm part of, Dr. Borovka mentioned that there was a mixed audience of expert and non-expert, and I'm definitely part of the non-experts. I'm a scientist here specializing in ancient metallurgy and trying to identify metalworking techniques, manufacturing techniques, and decoration. So here, so Rebecca was mentioning some of the short-term results that came out of this collaborative study between the Hermitage and the British Museum, and which are displayed in the exhibition. So I will talk about the gold, but colleagues of mine studied some of the glass, the textiles, and milling pattern, and I will show an example linked to the gold, and some identification of grains as well. The techniques that we use are all non-invasive, non-destructive, and one of the main techniques which I have used with Elena to look at the gold artifacts from the Siberian collection of Peter the Great is a newly acquired digital microscope, and it allows us to really look at tool marks and surface textures in great detail to try and identify techniques. To complement this, we've also used the scanning electron microscope, one of the two we have in our laboratories, and this scanning electron microscope has a wide chamber. You can see here, this is the door that slides in and out, and the stage onto which the object is placed. And we can operate this scanning electron microscope at low vacuum, so and put complete objects in it. So that allows us to do a lot of very detailed imaging as well, as analyzing the composition, thanks to this X-ray detector over there. But I will not talk about composition today. I'm really focusing on techniques. The last very useful non-destructive technique that we have used is X-ray radiography, and here I have used the fluted ball as an example. Here you have got the X-ray tube, and on the other side the screen. And basically, if you place your object in between, you generate some X-rays and you will get an image on the other side, and some of the X-rays will be absorbed and some of the X-rays will be transmitted onto the screen, and that's how you get an image. So I will show you some images and examples of what we can see. I have divided the groups of objects into two techniques, casting and handworking, and I will start with the casting techniques. It's been it's been something completely new for me. The casting for these particular objects. So as you can see, I've put them together. It consists of very specific types of objects. Those belt plaques. Some seem to be paired, but may not be when we look at the manufacturing techniques. And they have got, as Elena was mentioning this morning, they are dated from the 4th century to the 2nd or 1st century BC, so chronologically they're not contemporary, and also they vary in style a lot, and as we'll see, they sort of differ in, I would say, finishing techniques, not in the main techniques made to used to make them. So examples of what we look for and what we see to identify the techniques in between gold that has been handworked or gold that has been cast. Here I've used this plaque where there's a sort of monster attacking what is it? I think a tiger, and you get a very typical grainy texture everywhere, which is typical of casting. So that is a clear evidence of the casting used on this for this object. These are even more obvious. These are the two much smaller plaques with a tiger attacking a camel, and I've put the heads of animals because they're quite, you can see them quite well, I think, with ears and eyes and the nose. Same mirror image here, and then the tiger's eyes and ears and then cheek here. And here again, you get a very grainy texture when you look at them, and they really look as cast. There hasn't been any further work gone into them. And these objects are also particularly interesting on that level because they have no hooks, attachment fixtures or anything to them. So there are two questions there. Are they unfinished products? Have they been left in a non-finished state? But they have been, because we don't know, they haven't got any archaeological context, so we don't know, although we suspect they are from a burial environment, we haven't, a burial, we don't know. So are they unfinished, or were they especially intended for a burial? This is something that we could ask of these objects, since they have absolutely no attachment systems on them. After the casting, so normally what we see, the goldsmith has tried to remove any of the signs of his casting work. So he goes into using other techniques to polish and burnish the actual surface. And this plaque is a marvelous example of that, where you can really see the traces of the tool which has gone into the groove to really enhance the three-dimensionality where needed, and everywhere. But if you can see, in some very recessed areas, the tool hasn't gone, and you can still see what we call the dendritic structure, so the grainy texture I was showing you before. So although the goldsmith has tried to hide the casting, there is still very small details of that, but the work that has gone into the post-casting work is incredible on this object. Here, other examples on this plaque, again, completely different style, but you can see that there are marks of, again, a tool having gone into the hair to really enhance the flow of the hair on one of the horsemen, and the very smooth cheek, which has been really polished and burnished post-casting. An example of another post-casting work is then the openings, the open work, which has been cut into the gold to create all the nice openings which we see and make it look really nice and lovely. This plaque, to me, has raised more questions than answers, and I haven't had the time. I had a long day with Dr. Shadlavina and Dr. Minassian on Thursday on this, because these were looked at in August. So it's really research in progress, and I've got more questions than answers, unfortunately. And this is something I would like to discuss with them, is the surface texture is very different to all the other plaques, and I don't know whether it was intentional. But there's a very, very fine marks everywhere, that they're really on every aspect on the front, and it's something that we can't see on the other plaques, and it's definitely not the casting that has done that. So this is something that, if anyone has seen anything like this, I'd be happy to hear about it. Another post-casting work, as we've seen on the objects, on many of the gold objects which have been presented over the past days, are the inlays. And here, what is really interesting on this plaque, so in this example, we've got a mixture of stone and glass. Interestingly enough, all the eyes, so the eyes of the horses, of the goat, of the boar, and of the figures of the horsemen, are made of stone. We have tried to analyze this, but by Raman spectroscopy, but we haven't been successful. But all the other inlays are glass. They're different glass inlays. And what is really interesting here is both inlays are part of the arm on both arms of one of the horsemen. And you can really see here in one of the empty cells the tool marks, the work that has gone into the inlay cell to prepare the inlay. So we definitely know that, you know, if in the case there were no inlay present, you can really see the work and then deduce that there have been some inlays before, because in some cases it's not that obvious whether there have been inlays or not. Another example on this plaque, which has the two sort of dragon figures facing each other. In this case, we again have a mixture of stone and glass, and again, this is quite interesting. We have carnelian and green glass, and here again, you can really see how the surface of the gold has been worked with a tool to prepare the surface for the glass inlay, or the red inlay. I can't remember whether it's green or red which is missing, but there's a symmetry into there, so you can sort of know. Here, only turquoise. Before we've seen a mixture of various inlays. Here it's only turquoise inlays. And what is interesting here is, in some cases, the openness of the cells is quite interesting, which also makes us wonder how the inlays have been fixed. And there's surely something at the back which is holding them. So could it be a sort of glue of some sort? This is an interesting question. A lot of different colors from the turquoise, that's also quite interesting. And here we've got, this is not the only inlay, a few of them we can see on that particular plaque have holes, they have been drilled, and it makes us sort of think that there were beads which were reused then as inlays. So again, choice of material, why these? It's again raises more questions about why they used those. I was talking about attachment systems and fixtures on the various plaques. Interestingly, there's a combination of casting, loops and pins and square hooks in that case, and soldered. And here, I was just wanting to show you an example of how we can differentiate them. So here you can see that that's a square hook coming towards you. That's the flat part, and that's the part coming out. And the grainy texture that we have on the back of the plaque is exactly the same as on the square hook. And there's no evidence of any soldering or anything. So this one has definitely been cast in with the plaque itself. Here, on the other hand, this is really smooth and polished, and there is evidence of soldering when looking at a higher magnification with the microscope, and especially with the scanning electron microscope. So here are two different examples. On another plaque, we have, on two other plaques, again, two different examples. You can see how this loop, again, it's coming towards you. This loop has been soldered onto the plaque, and here there is a pin coming out, which is very smooth, again, no casting texture at all, and some traces of soldering which have been nicely scraped at the base. So various types of attachments as well. And so coming to the something that I've never encountered before, and which I have extensively discussed with Dr. Minasian, who's much more familiar with those. These are the textile impressions that we see at the back of the plaques. And you've got examples of 4 different objects, and as you can see, there are 4 different types of weaving there. And I have a colleague of mine, Nicole Reifarth, who's a specialist in textile, had a look with me, and she was at those patterns, and she was able to identify some types of weaving and even count the number of threads using the digital microscope. And so here, she was able to see that basically the cloth that was used that was impressed in that, that left the impression in the clay that then was imprinted into the plaque, was what she calls a twill. And I'm absolutely no expert, but indeed it really looks very similar. And here the very fine texture on this one was most likely made by what she calls a weft-faced plain weave. And there is a wonderful example of that kind of weaving in the exhibition. This is one of the textiles displayed in the exhibition. So the casting with a textile involved in the technique is something that I haven't made up my mind yet of how it's being made. The textile is involved in there, but how and where and in which step in the sequence is something that I want to continue the discussion with Dr. Minassian on this. One final item, which as far as Elena was telling me from statistical analogy, is slightly earlier than the plaques which have the textile impressions on the back. And this one hasn't got any textile impression on the back, this horse breast plaque. And it's most likely typical loft wax casting, and we've got some casting textures I've shown you on the other plaques at the front and at the back, and some casting porosity showing at the front as well. I just wanted to show you also on this particular piece, slightly earlier piece, there are some inlays. All the inlays that you've seen on the photos have gone, but the interesting thing on this piece is that there's a combination of techniques on how the inlay cells were made. There are classical cloisonné, typical cloisonné technique where you have got strips of gold which have been put into shape and then soldered to the base to then be inlaid, and this is the case for this. This is a wall, and this is a wall, so there must have been inlays both inside the circle, but also outside along the tail. This is the tail of the panther, and these are walls which have been soldered to the base, to the cast plaque. Everything else is cast in. Everything that you see is otherwise cast. And the other way the cells have been done are basically by having holes where you wanted your inlay to go, and have a sheet of gold which was cut to size and then patched at the back. So what we see here is basically a sheet, the back of the cell, where the sheet has been pushed back as a patch and then soldered in place. And here you have more examples. This is the head of the panther, and you've got its eye, and that's the patch at the back, and here as well. And it's just been patched for a cell to be created and an inlay to be inserted afterwards. So this is something I hadn't seen before either. As I was saying, the other type of techniques that so to finish on the casting, apparently the casting was the for that group of plaques which were cast with involving a textile in the whole process. There is the only other archaeological contextualized artifacts which have been found are either medieval Scandinavian or in China. There's no Scythian artifacts archaeologically contextualized which would show these techniques. So it's quite difficult to know where it comes from. But at the moment there is a strong feeling that it would come from the Far East. On the other hand, if we look at handworking technique and handworked sheet metal, and here I will show you a few examples, it is more towards the west this time. So it's quite interesting to see how styles and techniques are actually sort of dividing those objects. I will start with, so that's the plaque that you see on the top here, which after having discussed with Dr. Minassian and Dr. Shablavina, seems to be quite a unique on its own, basically. So this plaque has been made through hammering, and if I show you a few close-up views of there, everything you see that is on all its surface at the back are hammering marks, very strong hammering marks. And something that was really interesting to see with Elena using the microscope were those lines of lightly punched dots which are running everywhere. Once you start seeing them, initially you do not necessarily notice them, and once you start seeing them somewhere, you see them everywhere. And they run where they're following the pattern, the 3D patterns that you want on your scene. And it looks as if the goldsmith, instead of having hammered the plaque onto a positive matrix or onto a negative mold, for what it's worth, has sort of free-hammered his piece using the dots as an outline I mean, these outlines or incise lines are known from Roman context for drawing, but for actually hammering into 3D. If anyone has seen anything like this, again, that'd be really interesting to know. Just showing you an ancient repair, we did when we analysed the composition of the gold on the strip, and although they are surface analysis, they really look similar, and it really looks as an ancient repair. This strip at the back where the plaque was fractured. The talks. This time we used radiography to look through them. That made it a lot easier to understand how they were constructed. As Elena was saying this morning, this one is really reminiscent of Persian Achaemenid art. And as expected, they are tubular. They're they're different in style, but they're both tubular, and you can really see where the various tubes used join. And although it's outside of the picture, where you're supposed to open it with a rivet, which I will show in the next slide, you've got more than actually the two tubes you would expect. Here, there's another joint, which then when you know what to look for, you can see the seam very, very lightly using a microscope, but it's been very nicely burnished and very nicely hidden. What we were not expecting to find was that pin. There's a pin going from the head into the tube, and it's completely inconspicuous. It doesn't come out neither on the top or at the bottom. It's been really put inside, and then using the torsion of the torque, it's been concealed. So this is not something we were expecting, especially because it has already been soldered in place, so it is already quite a fixed system. So that's quite interesting. On the other hand, if we look at the stylistically different torque, it has pins which are really, really evident. I mean, when you look at the objects, you see them. The poor feline heads, they really have something going through. They have the rivet at the top of the pin in there. And again, you see it in some cases. It's supposed to go through the little spheres, which are all a really nice craftsmanship, those spheres, very small. And so, again, you have got pins here. And looking at these, it really makes me wonder whether they were part of the manufacturing process. Were they done at the same time, or were they done afterwards? Because the rest is really nice, and it looks very bizarre that has been included during manufacture. Here to show you the two different types of openings. As I was mentioning, the tubular one plain has a rivet which you remove, and then you slide the two tubes over a third one, and then once it's open you can probably use the torsion to put it around your head and then secure it again. On the other hand, this one is using a hinge system. You've got two hinges, and then you've got pins coming out, and you can remove two parts, and it's in three parts. You remove two, and then you can secure it again around your neck. And again, all the hinges system has been nicely decorated and hidden with strips of gold and twisted wires and beaded wires. I mean, it's really, really nice. Here, what I'm showing you is the underneath the tubes, which have been worked in a very nice way to look like twisted wire, have that seam going through their legs where the tube have been, where the sheet of gold has been curled into a tube and closed. That fluted gold also thought to be done in the western and for the Siberian, let's say in the Achaemenid Persian area. When we first looked at it, it was presented to me as the fluted gold with the cast solid handle. And interestingly enough, the X-ray showed that the handles were not solid. They're definitely hollow sheet work. And they were mechanically fixed to the, and maybe glued, but this is something that, I don't know. But at least what we can see is those feline handles have been made separately in two halves from sheet gold. And either, so this is a discussion I was having with Dr. Minassian, there are two ways. Either they have been worked from the back into and hammered into a negative, in a mold which has the negative, or there could be a positive matrix where you're actually working your sheet from the front, your two halves, and then removing them and then soldering them again. And again, this is, since we can't see inside, it's quite difficult to see the tool marks inside, and outside they have burnished the whole animal really nicely and decorated it. So it's the only thing we can see is the actual seam running through in the middle, so we know they have been made into halves. This is a close-up view of the petal-shaped attachment system, where you can see here that these are the rivets which have been hammered in to fix the handles onto the ball. And here is the view of those three rivets, and this is a close-up view. Interestingly enough, there should be, well, it doesn't matter. You have seen the X-ray of the aigrette shown by Elena this morning. There was the top view of that aigrette in here, so apologies about that. But this is a side view, and here again, like for the hollow handles, and as we were expecting, because you can see it when you look through that hole or where there's the damage around the ear. That is also hollow and has been made in a similar way. There is a seam going through, and it has been in a similar way to be made in a similar way than the handles. Just a few examples of showing the details of cloisonné work that has gone into that piece, and also the nice handwork, punching and chasing that has gone into there. Or whether it was actually working into a matrix. So as I was, I just wanted to finish to say that, as I was mentioning before, this is all new to me, and we did that in a very short period of time during the installation period, and it has been a really enlightening. And the comparable material which we looked at from the Oxus Treasure in terms of handworking techniques, which is all the objects around have been made by handworking techniques which are very similar to those identified on the Siberian collection of Peter the Great. And only those armlets are cast, solid cast. So as I was mentioning before, this has raised for me a lot more questions than answers, and as this is research in progress, I'm hoping to give you more information in the future. So just a few acknowledgements to colleagues. Here we are. And thank you for your attention.
We're quite close to time. We've got some good questions.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. Not so much a question as possibly an indication where to look further. In the Argent 2 volume, there is a study on the technology of the Argent gold by Barbara Amberson, which you might know. And of course, there's the BAR volume by David Redfern, published a couple of years ago.
Thank you. I haven't had time to read them, but I mean, the Barbara Amberster's, I read an article in German on the Argent 2, so yes, so that I have. But David Redfern, yes, I have seen the publication, and I have got it on my desk, waiting for me to read, to be read for me.
Well, thank you for that, and having terrible microscope enemy here. Very interesting textile impressions. First note is the fact that the twills and weft-faced tabbies, I know they don't mean much to you. To me, it means they're made in wool.
Okay.
These are typical weaves that would be made in wool, which is very interesting. And then the second comment is somewhere in a very deep recess of my mind, I feel I've seen something published on textile impressions on Chinese bronzes. Don't ask me where and at what period, but there may be something technological going on.
There are some Chinese casting which have the textile impressions, and they have been archaeologically contextualized, so that makes that's nice. Nothing for the Siberian style artifacts there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aude. I wondered if you'd seen signs of wear on the belt buckles, apart from the one that you mentioned that had been repaired.
Well, this is an interesting question. Yes, indeed. When I was showing, and I forgot to mention, sorry, when I was mentioning the grainy texture on the cast, cast, the ones which do not seem to have had a lot of work, of post-casting work. Indeed, the recessed areas have the grainy texture, but the higher areas, the ones in relief, are really smooth and they look really worn. But I think the main, as far as I understand, and again, because I'm not a specialist of the material and I haven't read enough, I thought that the general idea was that those had been made specifically for burials and not being used. But as far as I can see, for me, there are signs of wear. So I would expect them to be worn. In certain cases at least. The small ones, I don't know, the very small ones which have no fixings whatsoever and are really cast because they look really crude work, I'm not sure.
And I just wanted to add to the textile patterns on the back. You should be looking at Emma Bunker's work because it points to the Chinese. Yes. And in fact, I think one of the slides this morning was taken from one of her books.
Thank you. Yes, I had I think I have read a book chapter by her on the textile, what she calls wax lost textile technique. But I hadn't realised, again, after I've read it quite quickly, but I think I'll revisit that then. Thank you.
Thank you.
One last question, and then we must move on.
Ouch, that was the one I...
In your last picture, you show us these bracelets from treasure.
Yes, the armlets, yes.
And I have one question. So what is the evidence that the bracelets are casted, and what their weight?
Oh, the weight? Each is 140 or 50 grams. They're really heavy and they're solid. 150? Yeah, 150. They're pretty substantial when you handle them. And when we tried to do some X-rays that we couldn't go through. I mean, we're still testing our X-ray facilities because it's brand new, and we were trying to see whether with the power of the X-ray tube, whether we could actually see anything, to see any casting defects or porosity or anything like this. It doesn't go through. It's pretty solid gold, and so yes, I think they have definitely been cast.